Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Let Me Hear from Doc. I'm your host, Amanda Chappelle George, and with me is Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Claudius Mitchell. So, Dr. Mitchell, as usual, how was your weekend?
That's usual, very colorful in many ways. Of course, Mother's Day occurred, and of course, the church services with the 102-year-old mother, and of course, it's a very exciting time. And my other brother and I spent some time relaxing home with her. So it's a good, colorful weekend celebrating Mother's Day.
That's great. You mentioned Mother's Day and you mentioned your mom is 102. Can you give us some insights on the role that she had played and continues to play in your life in the political arena?
But I think all my brothers and sisters would tell you that she was really the genuine head of the house in the sense of the one who was home. My father was basically working, and he did literally many jobs trying to make sure that the family had basic necessities. So she was the one stable force around us who were ensured that discipline prevailed, and of course was not afraid to dish out punishment as she saw fit. Um, we all knew that whenever we did some wrong, and someone had to um, at least dish out some punishment, that we had preferred our father to be the one to do so, because he would come and with his strap and give you pip, 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 and then he's tired and he stopped. But she would put you kneel down and give you one and then talk to you and give you another one. And so sometimes the time would be about 15, 20 minutes of that. And sometimes she would say that if we did something and she was sad, she'd say, well, I'm not going to do that to dish out punishment today. I'm tired tomorrow. So you could imagine you're sleeping, you can't sleep because all you remember is what will happen the next days. But I think when we all look back, we knew that she meant well and that she had our best interests and the discipline, because as you know, children always need guidance. We see that in our own children as we grow older and had our own. And not only that, boy children in particular always want their own way. The girls are usually much more obedient and more willing to obey the rules set by the family. Boys, no matter what they do, we would want to break rules, especially in our case, where we loved sports. No matter what they do, we will find a way to break rules and get onto the football field or the cricket field, and having disobeying the orders that you have to be home a certain time. So no matter how much they punished us, we would still be breaking the rules. But the girls were much more willing to accept the responsibility of what the parents wanted and so on. So my mom would always be seen as the matriarch in a true sense of the word. But she was also someone who was respected by the community because of the way she treated people. Her mother was one of the stalwarts in the fish market in St. George's. Her name was Sasa. That was her nickname. Someone who used to just help everybody. So I think she picked up that from her mom, taking people from the street and bringing them home and taking care of them, and so on, despite the fact that she had a lot of her own to be taken care of, and she was not somebody with much resources, but she always made sure there was enough food for everyone. So I think my mother followed that basic principles that my grandmother Sasa laid down and lived. And I think she patterned her life in that same way. So the people around her in the community always knew that she has a last cent or last thing, she would give it away. And that's the type of person that she was. So she's always going to be seen as someone to be emulated in every sense of the word. So we are very happy yesterday to celebrate that they were in the church in Happy Hill, celebrated and recognized her for reaching to 102, and hopefully that she would make 103.
During your tenure as Prime Minister, your cabinet had the most women in history of governance of Grenada. How do you think this gender mix influenced the policies of the government?
Well, you see, we fundamentally, I think we all know we grew up in a society that always saw women as secondary. That's the society we grew up. The men were able to get away with a lot of stuff, and the women were not. And even the question of, you look at what was happening in the political arena, that women were the backbone of political support for all the political parties in the country. But while they were the ones who did most of the work and saw to it that the political organization scored heavily, they were not given the level of leadership or positions in the party that the work demanded. And that was a history. So the men were always on top in every area of service in the political organization. Historically, look back at all the political parties, you will see that. And it has a lot to do with the society that we grew up who did not recognize women in the way that they should. In fact, I believe in our own society, in our own family, I should say, you can see that the boys always were looked upon as the one that was going to be given more support and was looked on as the one who would go take care of the family in the future. That was the perception. And I remember in some families and that they did not see the value. And I heard it said that why waste your time educating the girls when they will just go and make children or get married? So you have to spend all your money and time on the men. That was a mindset in many families in the country during the time that we were growing up. So that you could have seen that the society had some biasness, some bias against women. But we, having grown up in that era, I understood that, and I understood that women value should be much more appreciated in a practical sense, which means that they should be given responsibility that they deserve based on the efforts. In other words, it should not be their gender that gives you position. So if we look at the women that emerged in many positions in the party, they were not taking responsibilities. They were not taking positions. They were people who genuinely deserved the areas of responsibility that they were given. There were no attempt to placate them. So we saw the best persons needed to be in the position of leadership in every single area, and therefore whether it's a man or woman, and I think it is that philosophy that was responsible for so many women emerging in the top positions in the New National Party, in government, and of course at a party position in the country as a whole. So I think that when you look at the amount of women that were in key positions in the government, the last government, and in the party, and you look at the National Democratic Congress coming into office after, with some younger people who should have a much more fresher and younger vision than we did have, given all the age differences. But look at only one woman in the cabinet, basically. So one woman in Parliament, among the many members that they had, talking about the elected House of Representatives. It's a clear indication that that the philosophy was quite different going forward.
We are also fresh from May Day celebrations. On the fringes of the celebrations, we saw the out-court settlement of 10 workers, mostly females, who were fired when this government took office. You know, what's your take on that?
But I think it's a general problem that this National Democratic Congress, as a party, has a history of when they get into office to victimize or to attempt to discredit or, in many cases, to remove persons that were serving in specific position just because they were associated with the other government. One expects when a government is changed, especially in top position of policy, you expect to see changes. I'm not talking about that, the areas of a policy decision or leadership. We're talking about position of service, of workers producing in specific areas. These people were producing. It had nothing to do with their party affiliation. And they were just summarily removed. And there could only be one reason. And you compare that to the new National Party when we got into office after the NDC, or in a 5-year stint, which was only the length of time they served in each occasion. We made it clear. I made it clear. Even when some members of my own government felt this person should go, I said, what is the basis you want to move them? The basis you want to move them, if you're saying the basis you want to move them is because they were identified or perceived to be not supporters of the NNP, then we are now in government, and we pledged, we took an oath to support the Constitution without fear or favor or ill will. That was the oath we took. And now you're saying because persons are perceived not to be supporters, that they should not live? Well, that does not make a lot of sense. In fact, I made it clear that to people in government, and we ensured that by and large, I can't say we were perfect because there's some things will pass through it, will go through the cracks, so to speak. And I made it clear that if you are a seriously good politician, you have to know that you treat people well, and they may not necessarily have supported you. You may win them over. And in any event, a serious political organization must know. And a serious politician must know. Not everybody that voted for you the previous election will vote for you next time. Because some people vote for specific reasons, and if they don't get everything they want, they're ready. Or you might do something that they don't like, and they just turn overnight, and so on. So you always know that you might lose some votes. So you have to gain. How do you gain? If you treat those who voted for you in a way that tell them they should not exist, you can't win anybody. So that is why you notice in my own constituency that the political support has always grown. And I've never got less than 80% of the votes, except on the first occasion when I ran. And it was because of that philosophy that you have to give people a chance. And therefore, I was winning over people who didn't vote for me the previous election. And the lowest percentage I got in my own constituency after 1984, when I ran for the first time, was the last election where I think the party as a whole dropped considerably nationally. So it happened in my own area, but it was about 80% support, which is still extremely high, relatively speaking. So I think it's extremely important for people to understand that. And I think that's the problem, I think, the National Democratic Congress. And I must say, while the previous NDC government was extremely bad, was bad in that area of attempting to get rid of or to disregard the service of people who they perceived did not vote for them. This one is by far the worst. because there's no one in that government you can talk to about certain behavior patterns. When you look at the fact that after being prime minister for 23 years in this country and serving for almost 40 years plus in parliament, there is no one in this government I'm able to call when something is going wrong. And I remember in the first NDC government, while I opposed their politically and in parliament, was very critical. When something went wrong, I could call certain persons. I would call name, and they would listen. In the NDC government in 2008 2013, there were persons or a couple of persons in there that I could still call. There isn't one person in this present government whom you could call and say, listen, you are going too far. This is the problem. This lady that you guys victimizing don't deserve this. And I think you need to look out. She has family, she has this. And so issues like this, I could speak to them, but not this group. This group, they are up in the sky. They're enjoying themselves. They're living life. And their perception of people, if you can bribe them and give them something materially, ignore them. That is the perception. That's their politics. It's a materialistic politics, and you can't bribe everybody. You could only bribe a few, and that will listen to you and follow your directive after the so-called bribe. So you have a fundamental problem that this government has a fundamental moral problem. That some people are when we saw it from the beginning, when we saw certain key positions of going to be filled by certain persons whose historical character, were seriously questionable. When we saw those appointments early, we said this government is doomed. And I said it to a number of persons because you couldn't be publicly critical at the time because everyone wants to give the new government an opportunity. But the decision that you make in the first week or so, I always tell people that you can judge a new government, very early. And the way you judge them is the type of person or the quality of the persons they choose to occupy key positions that involve the activities of the government or the policies of the directives of the government. That could be a key barometer in measuring the possible success or failure of that government. So from day one, I saw it from certain key decisions that were made. And in fact, one would always say, look at who the present government chooses to act as prime minister. You don't have to go far. Look at the level of the person that they choose. The lack of depth, the lack of moral character. It's quite evident. And no one is perfect, but talking about the level of that character, this deficit is so deep that you wonder, any person in any serious responsibility can put that in our country.
You mentioned a lot about victimization, right? That seems to be a common theme circulating throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique. So I just want to ask, why are persons who supported NDC right now are so quiet when there's a blatant talk of corruption within their own administration?
Well, you see, my view, and it's something I always felt since a young boy growing up, when I watched what was happening with the Grenada National Party and the Grenada United Labour Party. They were the two main political parties during the time I was growing up as a young boy. My parents were very supportive of the Grenada United Labour Party. And I used to always say that when one party is in office and they do certain things, the supporters of that party were always very supportive of what they were doing, even when it was obvious that they were fundamentally wrong. And when the other party comes into office, as they did, the same thing was happening, and they were very critical. And I used to always say as a young boy, but that does not make sense. Even if you support an organization and they're doing something that's fundamentally wrong, I'm not saying that if you support the party and you have some loyalty, that you have to go out in the street, but you certainly have to let your voices internally and otherwise be known that this is not right. And I think by doing so, you will be making your organization stronger and more effective. But when you support what they're doing is wrong, you're helping to bring them down. And that is my fundamental philosophy. And that is the philosophy I've kept. I always tell people, when I hear people criticize, because no government is perfect, and therefore I accept the fact that when we were in government, we made mistakes. And we will make mistakes. And any government in office will not be able to satisfy every single person or group with decisions that they make. And therefore you have to listen to people. And that's why when I hear some people who were very critical, even when there was nothing that was truthful about corruptions, I can't say our government was perfect in that regard, but certainly some of the accusations were so far-fetched and fundamentally flawed. For example, the issue of briefcase. Everybody know about this. When every member of the government, the opposition, was vilifying me about this briefcase and indicating that they would have evidence and so on, and they would, when they get in office, I would be in jail. And people were supporting all kinds of organizations, were believing them, and they had people from outside in the region and outside international believe that I did what was being said. And I, of course, vehemently indicated that it was false. In fact, I challenged in a national address that if anyone was able to bring any proof on this, that they have my resignation the next day. Of course, no one came forward, but the accusations continued. But I'm just making that point. So we accept the fact that people had a right. And I know we have people like William Joseph, who was a very strong supporter of the National Democratic Congress. He was very critical, philosophically and otherwise. And I remember whenever I meet him, I say, William, I don't agree with you, but I understand your right to take issue with certain decisions that were made, and indicated to him, by your criticism, you're helping to strengthen the National Party, because some of it may have validity that in which will help us to change course or to take corrective action. So people like him could never say that we went after him and attacked him on a personal level because of his position. And you see today, he's clearly taken some strong line against the National Democratic Party, the party that he supported, and was able and were willing enough to say that he helped to bring them into office, but he couldn't support some of the things that are going on. I wish a number of other persons in organizations who are very strong in the criticism of our government, and when even accusations were not as clear as it is today, would speak up and let their voices be heard. In fact, by their appearing to be silent, unwilling to take issue with what is glaringly wrong, they are weakening the political organization, because a lot of people who voted for them and are not really strong members are taking issues and will not vote for them again, simply because they see this official actions of the government in office is being supported by its friends, and their unwillingness to change course and to correct and to call out or to take actions to deal with the persons within the government who appear to be doing those things. That, to me, is a medicine for political disaster, and this is why the government is losing support every day, and that's why the possibility of them facing an election, a free and fair election, and winning is the probability is very low, and that's why we have to be careful that they could only hope they can have for winning an election is by fraudulent means, by padding the voters list with people who are not legally able to register, to have them on the list and to vote them into office. That's the only how they can have a chance of winning. And therefore, we have to be vigilant, and we have to spend a lot of our time taking strong positions against anything we see within electoral office. And that's why the supervisor of elections must have to face the consequences. If he is managing any institution like this, and not doing it with a sense of morality and truthfulness, then he will face the consequences as a person for his own character and his own life, his own history. So I think it's important that he takes stand up for what is right. The previous supervisor of the election, it's well known that the NDC won an election, free and fair elections, with his presence, and he was removed, and evidence of stories that we don't know the reason, have never been given an official reason why he was removed, but reasons we have reason to believe is because he was not willing to do some of the things that was against the fundamental rights of free and fair elections. He was unwilling to do it, and therefore he was summarily dismissed. And therefore the new supervisor must know that he's on notice, and of course he's been watched carefully for any decision that he makes which is going against the principles of a free and fair election.
Dr. Mitchell, back to May Day celebrations, right? We have heard that the GTAW president spoke on the removal of that 5-hour workday for agricultural workers, and that is going to cause them to work for 8 hours by reducing their hourly rate of pay. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, clearly, if someone is doing a service and earning a certain amount of money for working 5 hours, there is a rate. You can divide the amount of money received by 5 and find out the hourly rate. So if you now insist that he must work for 8 hours, then clearly his salary has to be adjusted accordingly. And clearly that's not the case. So therefore, the unions are in their right to take a strong position. If they didn't, then they'd be abdicating the fundamental responsibility for taking action that will certainly ensure that the workers are treated appropriately. So clearly, I think the unions are in a strong position with respect to that particular issue, and therefore the government has no choice but to yield. If the unions appear to be forceful and standing their ground on a fundamental issue of morality with respect to the workforce.
The Minister for Labour, in her presentation, she claimed that the government had kept the promises to the workers. Do you think that this is the case, particularly for pension
First of all,
permanent workers?
First of all, you see, I had a problem from day one. When I said to you that you judge a government and its ability to succeed or fail based on the decision made. To me, the Attorney General of the country, the Minister of Legal Affairs, in particular the Attorney General, is such a position in a government. It's outside of the Prime Minister. It is the key position. And in any government, whenever a government is elected, the two appointments that are made early is the appointment of the Prime Minister and then the Attorney General and Minister, hopefully also Minister of Legal Affairs. But it doesn't have to be the same, but Attorney General key. So it means that the Attorney General has to be one, because he's the chief law enforcement officer, who, while being a member of the government, has to be seen as impartial as possible. And to take that same person and give him the responsibility of Minister of Labor, when in fact a lot of the issues dealing with labor will come before that minister was supposed to be impartial, then you see the folly or the problems in that particular decision. And therefore, from early, when the first dispute came, and they asked the Minister of Labor, what she did was condemn the workers and said that they had no case. She was judge and jury at the same time, which is crazy. And my own view is that I don't think the minister seemed to just demonstrate he has the capacity to understand the seriousness of the job that she has accepted. And I know when I say this, they'll get mad with me, but the truth can only be the truth. You could pose, you can talk, you can make statements, but you're going to be judged by your actions and the actions that she has taken. And so many cases, or words, even when she's addressing the workers is highly questionable about our understanding of our role. So they seem to lack that level, that capacity to understand. Some people say not necessarily being capable, but you can make that judgment, as you see, but you can only judge someone based on how they come off on issues of importance that shows whether they understand their role or not.
Government has applied charges on water, electricity, sugar, and had removed that cap placed on gas by your administration, and had removed that 150 from the seed recipients, among many other things. Do you think these have compounded the cost of living?
Well, of course it must. I mean, if it's particularly when you're dealing with cost of living, the issue of poverty, the issue of the poor and vulnerable must be a major factor. So in any decision you make in respect to taxes or sacrifice, you must take into consideration the most vulnerable person in the society. And when you remove the cap that we had on that for basic needs and things like sugar and water and so on, that every man must use. So I'm in one position and I'm earning a certain level of income. Another person learning far less. They have to buy the sugar the same price like me. They have to pay for water the same price like me. And all of us have to use water. We don't have a choice. And electricity services and so on. So clearly, this government from day one never saw to it that they had a special responsibility to think carefully about decision that it makes, that has a lot of implication for the life, the ability of the poor person to survive or to be able to cope with his basic livelihood and so on. So clearly, it is a problem that we see, and clearly the cost of living in this country, as you see, everyone is talking. Even the persons that may be able to afford it better than others are complaining because they go to the grocery store today, 2 weeks later they go and the prices of every piece of good that have gone up enormously. Some cases you can't even trace the rationale behind the increase and so on. So when it goes to issues of the CPI, sorry, when you look at this, it's basic goods and services that are involved in that calculation. Now, it means that when you take decisions that increases that, and you see it's going up at a level that it cannot be explained, it means that you're affecting the poor and vulnerable in a very serious way. But I don't think that's an issue for this government at all. They don't seem to accept that responsibility that the people, the suffering that is endured by these people should be certainly looked at and be given special consideration for relief, which is what we did in government and going forward. So we have a serious problem with cost of living. I see it myself with the goods that we buy, and I have to buy myself for daily livelihood. And if it's affecting me, I could imagine the effect on the poor and vulnerable in the society.
Dr. Mitchell, we are about to wrap up, but let's talk about housing for a little bit, because this government right now is the biggest real estate agent in Grenada with the commercialization of government housing. So what are your thoughts on this government's handling of housing?
But it goes, and Amanda, it goes right back to the point we just made. They don't seem to have a special interest or care for the poor and vulnerable. We went to China, for example. It's a very simple case, important one. As a government, we recognize that we have a serious issue of housing in the country, particularly for single mothers and people from the lower strata in our society. Because those of us who work and have enough sufficient income will go to the bank and get loans and build houses. But these people are not in a position to do this. So I remember our Deputy Prime Minister at the time, may God bless his soul, Alvin Nimrod. Both of us went to China, both the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister in a delegation. I made it clear to the Chinese that one of the serious concerns was the economic decisions that we'll make in terms of helping the country move forward. And that housing was going to be a key component of the discussion. And after we discussed it, they agreed thousands of homes were to be built as gratis to the people of Grenada. This was all grant money. There was not money. There were loans that were to be paid back. And that they specified, we specified, was mainly for the poor and vulnerable. And therefore, the people who were expected to go to the banks and get loans would not qualify. And therefore, these people would have minimal amount, for example, they'd have to. We're not talking about giving them completely free houses because they had to pay for water and electricity connections and so on, and basic amount that was necessary. That because even when you're poor, you would have a family member who would be able to meet some basic expenses. So we are not trying to say we must spoon feed people at all levels. There are some people who can't afford anything, and government can subsidize and make exceptions. So we did take that as a serious responsibility. Unfortunately, we lost government. So a lot of these people who had an excellent opportunity to get these houses. This government come in and decide that people have to go to the bank to raise 50, 60 or whatever, $70,000. How many of these people will? So what's happening? Most of the houses that are now occupied or is now owned by persons given to people who should have been able and would have been able to initiate buying a house for themselves or building a house for themselves. So the poor and the vulnerable, which the Chinese government and the government of the day in Grenada had agreed should occupy these houses and be given it, have lost out. So which is, again, demonstrate that this government, one thing, they're very consistent in their attitude to the poor and vulnerable in the society. There is no care, the lack of empathy. And you could see this, you always judge a government based on its leader. If the leader has demonstrated no empathy, which this present one has, he spends all his time outside of the country. He's not attempt to see people. Even in their own constituency, they don't see him, and so on. And when he speaks, you don't feel any empathy. You could see he's speaking as some theoretician and so on, who just there because he believes everybody is looking up to him. And in fact, he doesn't know what people judge. They're politicians. They're not judging an academic. They're judging a politician. And a politician's fundamental criteria of a good politician is empathy and love for people. And if they don't see this, you could do all that you think you're doing. You go and build a house, build a road. That's secondary to feeling the pain of a person who's seeking help and who's hurting out there. If they don't feel it, you're gone politically. And that would be the history of this government if they continue. And I don't know that's quite possible that they can change course.
Well, we're in examination season, CPEA, CXC. So what words of encouragement or advice would you like to share with students preparing for these examinations?
Put your best foot forward. I always say that, I saw myself when I had to be doing scholarship examinations, studying hard, and listening to your parents, because in our case, we had parents who were very much supportive of our academics pursuit and so on. And I would certainly hope that the young ones listen to their parents, because the parents are the ones who want to guide them and who feel proud of their success and want to see the best for them. So listen to your parents, work hard, and always do what you can to ensure that you have maximum success in what you're going through. So that would be my advice to young people. The same advice I would have given to myself a number of years ago.
Well, we wish you guys all the best. And that's all the time we have for today, Dr. Mitchell. That's all the time we have for today, folks. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.